I've always been super into sports, and I've done a lot of physical therapy because of just issues with my body in general and getting injured playing sports. And I've noticed that there's a lot of things that are applicable in the music world as well. I do help a lot of people who are recovering from injuries, but my goal is to make sure that we're playing as efficiently as possible and we're taking care of our bodies so that we don't ever have to experience an injury. Overuse injuries probably are more common in musicians just because we don't have those contact hours with coaches regularly, with athletic trainers who are constantly putting you through programs and guiding you through exercises. We don't have rest days built in. So something that I really work on with especially my younger students is I get them to reflect on what they're hearing. You see your lessons teacher once a week. Every other moment you are alone with yourself and you're practicing. So you have to learn how to listen to yourself and how to analyze what you're doing so that instead of spending an hour practicing a passage over and over and over again without thinking, instead you'll probably be able to get through that passage maybe in 20 minutes of actual effective, efficient practicing. School doesn't really give you the opportunity to take a break. So anytime I had to learn something new, I was singing it. Just trust that you're a good enough musician that you'll be able to do what you need to do the next day.
Hey, welcome back to the show, everybody. Today's guest is another person I met actually at the International Trumpet Guild, this time in Anaheim, California versus Minneapolis, Minnesota, where it was last year. And I'm really starting to love going to this festival because I can get to meet such cool people. And one of these people was somebody that had actually been suggested to me for a guest on the podcast a little while ago. And I had the good fortune of meeting her in Anaheim. She is the trumpet professor at the University of Saskatchewan. She is also a social media influencer for the trumpeters in the world. Dr. Kayla Solomon, so excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I was actually in Minneapolis for ITG too, so we just didn't cross paths last year.
Just missed you, I guess. Yeah. It was a crazy, that was a crazy festival or conference for me because I was just running all over the place. And
were you
same
volunteering?
For this year, actually. Yeah. They've got a great program with that. So that was a lot of fun. But so anyway, Dr. Solomon, do you want me to call you Kayla or?
You can just call me Kayla. And
Kayla.
This is fine. This is good. Only awesome. My students need to call me by my professional name.
There you go. So Kayla, as we were talking a little bit before, I like to start out by just having people share their stories with injury, basically how they got into this realm of injury recovery or injury prevention and stuff like that. So if you want to just share with the audience what your experience with injury has been as a trumpeter.
Yeah, when you first asked me, when you were going over it before we started, and you were like, talk about your experience with injury. And I've actually never been injured as a trumpet player. I've never had a trumpet-related injury. All of my injuries have been related to other things.
Sure.
Like sports and stuff. But I've always been super into sports. And I've always done personal training and working out. And I've done a lot of physical therapy because of just issues with my body in general and getting injured playing sports. And I've noticed that there's a lot of things that are applicable in the music world as well. So
absolutely.
That's sort of where my interest came in. I think my dad, he always told me he wanted me to be a physical therapist so that I could take care of him when he's old. But that's always sort of been on the back of my mind. And then in my undergrad, I had a teacher who experienced a lot of recovery time after surgery. So he had been born with a cleft lip. And he ended up having a bunch of reconstructive surgeries over the course of his lifetime. And he started playing trumpet when he was like really, really young in his family band. And first of all, I don't know why they would put a kid with a cleft lip on the trumpet for the family band. But so that was another big reason why I got into the whole injury prevention and rehabilitation, because a cleft lip isn't something you can really prevent, but I've seen someone recover from it and do really well. So like if someone can go through that much surgery in their life and, you know, that much, I guess, trauma, that much, it's a lot. It's very taxing mentally to have to rebuild your playing all of the time. I thought that like anyone should be able to come back from that. And to go even further, we should focus on preventing that from even happening. So I'm super into like the prevention, the idea of injury prevention. And I do help a lot of people who are recovering from injuries, but my goal is to like make sure that we're playing as efficiently as possible and we're taking care of our bodies so that we don't ever have to experience an injury. So that's sort of what I try to do with my own playing and with all of my students.
Yeah, and there you hit the nail on the head. Athletes, I've heard it said that musicians are just athletes with smaller muscles, or dealing with smaller muscles, I guess. And the research that I've been doing recently is there's really no difference at least from a mental, psychological standpoint of the injury recovery process, and even the psychological process of injury prevention, right? I mean, there are, like you said, like cleft lip, there's really not much you can do to prevent that I know of, in my very, very, very limited knowledge of cleft.
I mean, you're born with it, so.
You're born with it, right? Yeah, so there's really nothing you can do. But a lot of athletic injuries there are impact related or just like instantaneous, but a lot of them are overuse related, which I feel like is a little bit more common in the musician world. And so going into this prevention side of things, what are some commonalities you see between athletes who get injured and musicians who get injured from an overuse standpoint? Or even in your experience getting injured as an athlete. I had to quit sports because I kept getting injured, so I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, sports ended up changing my career path entirely. So, I mean, it's great because I ended up playing trumpet, but it's a big thing. I think that in my experience, because I've been so immersed in the musical world for the last over a decade, I think that overuse injuries probably are more common in musicians just because we don't have those like contact hours with coaches regularly, with athletic trainers who are constantly putting you through programs and like guiding you through exercises. We don't have rest days built in, and we're not encouraged to stretch or do a body warm up, a full body warm up or cool down at the end of our day. We're not training our muscles to like hold our instruments. And so because of that, we end up relying so much on those small muscles that we use to play our instruments. And they're small and they get tired fast. And so then we keep pushing them. And a lot of the time musicians, especially trumpets, we're meatheads about it. Like you just like keep bashing the same passage over and over and over again. You keep trying for those high notes and you're going to get hurt. Some of my best playing days happen after a day of travel where I only did a warm-up that day or I didn't play at all. And it's because my muscles had time to recover from all of this training that I put them through the days leading up to it. So that's my take on overuse injuries in athletes versus musicians. This is all my personal experience and observations. I have no data to back this up. But this is like a big thing in our world. And I've read a lot of studies about I don't have the numbers with me, but a certain percentage of musicians who will experience an overuse injury at some point in their career. And then out of that, a certain percentage of musicians who will not be able to return to their instrument after experiencing that injury. And that shouldn't happen. So.
No, it shouldn't. Absolutely not. And I'm so glad that we have this athletic, I guess, worldview, or maybe that's a little too grandiose of a term, but like just this frame of looking at this this topic, because I was in football and basketball, very intense athletic competitive situations, right? And they push you physically and mentally and things like that. And I've had this question just ever since my injury, at least, or my music related injury, where like, what's the divide? Where, like, what makes it so athletes, and I'm not diminishing athletes' experiences with injury, those are equally as mentally taxing and debilitating even, or have the potential to be. But I don't know, I feel like with athletes, and you can speak to your experience as well. I'm not sure what sports you've been involved in, but like, I don't know, I feel like there's a little bit more of like a motivational factor with athletes that maybe isn't as present with musicians, or if it's the fact that musicians tend to be a little bit more error focused or error correction focused than athletes in a not helpful way, I guess, and stuff like that. So what do you think are the things that, I guess, from a psychological or a culture standpoint even, that maybe I guess musicians could take a leaf out of the book of athletes, or vice versa?
That's a big topic. I think that there's a parallel between sports and music, the idea that the show must go on, right? If you're a musician, there's usually not a sub or, like someone on the bench waiting to fill in for you. So there's
no
that
third stringer.
Yeah, there's that pressure, because if anything happens to you, there's no replacement. And then second of all, we are trained to want to do everything ourselves so that we don't need a replacement, because we need to be the best, or like, we don't want to seem weak. So there's that kind of mentality. Like there's so much toxicity in the music world and in the trumpet world, especially, like people refusing to have assistants because they want to carry the show on their own. And it's like, bro, it's just a concert. Like, we know you're good. You don't have to like almost, kill your face to play through this concert. Like, give the easy stuff to the assistant, take the solos. Like, we need to approach music making as more of a team sort of idea, because athletes, right? I've been watching the Olympics. I don't know if you've been watching the Olympics, but like watching
Absolutely.
the other athletes from different countries, they're competing against each other, especially in gymnastics, because I'm like a huge fan of Simone Biles and just like everything.
She's my hero at this point.
Right? And they're cheering for each other on other teams. They're congratulating each other. It's like, I feel like that is a great example of healthy competition. I mean, it's still super high pressure, and the athletes go through like so much stress, and like they have to be super on top of things mentally. But when you have that kind of support system built in, like if you're in a trumpet section where everyone's super supportive, no one's like hoping that you fail, I think that's the worst kind of environment to be in, because when the people around you are hoping that you fail so that they can get your spot, or so that you don't do well, and I don't even know what. But I feel like we've all had that experience, especially in high school. I remember I felt that way too, and if someone else was doing better, I'd be like, ugh, I don't like that. And now it's like, it's great. We're all improving. We're all doing our best. And I think it's really important to have that mindset. That's a big thing that we can incorporate into our music society, into our trumpet community, is lifting each other up rather than just like hoping that someone trips and falls on their face, because trumpet is so hard. It is so hard to play the instrument. And then if you get all of these little like mental demons going on, then you're just going to end up messing yourself up. So yeah, that's my thought on that.
No, it's so good. I am happy you brought up the Olympics, because I was low-key wanting to do that like for the entire interview, because I've just been binging it. Well, I don't know if you can binge it if it's live, but
there's always
I've just been
something
eating
playing.
it up. There's always something playing, like literally every hour of the day, because it's in Paris. But just that team aspect, I talk a lot about on the show of the importance of community and coming back from an injury. But I don't know. I don't think we've ever really discussed being a team or like the community or that team aspect as an instrument of prevention even. But it totally makes sense, right? Because if we are supportive of each other as a community, that's putting us ourselves personally in the best headspace to where we're not attaching the entirety of our identity to the outcomes of our playing, right? Or our practice session. For me, it was less about the performances and more about the practice sessions that always got me, right? I don't know if you can relate, but it was always the hours and hours of practicing and it not working for me that always were the debilitating parts of my musicianship that ultimately contributed to my injury.
That's such an interesting thing to bring up, because first of all, music school, like going to college for music, it's not like they shove so much information at you in those 4 or 5 years, however many years you take to do that it's like, it doesn't give your brain the chance to absorb all of it. I've been out of school. I've only been out of school for 1 year, but I am still experiencing like aha moments from my undergrad and from my master's that I'm like, oh, this is what they meant by that. And that's totally normal because we get an overload of information in our brain and it's in there somewhere, but our brain doesn't have the means to process it that quickly. Also, if you're in school, you are likely not sleeping very well. You're likely not eating or working out as much because the music degree in itself is awful like that. Like, we are encouraged to prioritize music and rehearsals and practicing and all of that over the rest of our lives. And so if we don't take care of ourselves, like do something outside of music, for goodness sake, like anything outside of music, because your brain needs that break and you need sleep in order for your brain to process information. And, I'm not saying like take the entire summer off of practicing, but like don't say no to things outside of music because you feel tied down by the need to practice. Like the trumpet will still be there, but like you got to live your life. And my undergrad, I had the mentality, it was very toxic for me in my undergrad, but I had the mentality that if I wasn't doing something to better myself as a musician every waking moment of the day, then I was a failure. And that's silly, but that's what I thought. So
can I interrupt you just there and point something out you just said there? Because that was also one of the big lessons that I learned post-injury, right? Was that, oh, look, I've got my entire life just being neglected outside of the trumpet. But the two things. So first of all, I think we need to redefine what makes us better as a musician, like in the actual musicianship, because if we're going to talk about science, right, and the studies and stuff like that, everything that I've read, like legitimate scientific studies say that taking breaks in between, like even repetitions of things, does like up to 20 to 25 times more. It's 20 to 25 times more effective than just doing it over and over and over and over again, right? Without any rest. Not only is that bad for you physically, but it's not doing you any favors mentally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though we have this whole like, we have to do it 5 times in a row before it's in there, it's stuck in there, which may be true. Like there may be some truth to that, but doing like giving ourselves the gaps in between those repetitions, that's part of what it means for me of like redefining like what helps me become a better musician, including and especially investing time into these other parts of my life, because that's going to give my brain, as you said, the time to internalize those other topics. So anyway, I interrupted you, so please.
I don't even know what I was talking about, but you just sparked another thought. So I'm going to go off of that one.
Please.
Taking breaks like in between your reps while you're practicing is super important, because so many people will just, and I do that too. I'm so good at practicing inefficiently, and I'll just take a passage and I'll just play it over and over and over and over and over again. And I'll make the same mistake over and over and over again. But when I finally play the passage, stop, think about what I heard, what I want to hear, and then make that connection of like, okay, what can I try to do to change the outcome? It's like the definition of insanity, right? It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. But that's how so many of us practice, because I don't know, when we were kids, it's always like, okay, you got to do it 5 times perfect, like you said, but there's no thinking involved in between. It's just like, bop, 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 do it. So something that I really work on with, especially my younger students, is I get them to reflect on like what they're hearing. And I think that's an important skill to have, because same thing as I said before with musicians versus athletes, like you see your lessons teacher once a week. Every other moment you are alone with yourself and you're practicing. So you have to learn how to listen to yourself and how to analyze what you're doing, so that instead of spending an hour practicing a passage over and over and over again without thinking, instead you'll probably be able to get through that passage maybe in 20 minutes of like actual like effective, efficient practicing. So yeah, it's another thing that I'm really, really big on, is like, you do not need to be practicing trumpet 4 hours a day. You can get by with practicing like 2 hours as long as you're like mentally there. You've got the focus, you have a plan set up. So many people will just like, well, it's time to practice trumpet. And they're just like, scales. Oh, I'm going to do some Clark studies. Oh, I'm going to do some of this and do some of that. It's like, but what are you focusing on? What are you targeting? What are your weaknesses? Because chances are the things that you're practicing, you're already good at. So we want to practice the things that we're bad at. And we want to be okay with sounding bad at them for the beginning part. And then as they get better, then you can be like, oh, notice the progress, and you can celebrate the progress. So yeah, just another tangent.
No, I'm listening and I'm just like, oh man, she's like I want to take this conversation so many different directions, but just a thought, and I don't know if there's any research on this yet, but just from my observations from different teachers that I've observed, mostly, I've had some experiences with teachers, not on my instrument, but I'm wondering if the teaching model that that's kind of been ingrained in us in the music world, could be a contributing factor to this, like just repetition, like inane, repetition, the repeating of the word repetition,
Yes.
And this, I could be totally just barking up the wrong tree with this, but I've noticed in lessons that teachers, when they're trying to help a student like perfect a passage, they don't give the time of mental rest and recognition, if that's a word. I don't know. Recognition. Might have to edit that out. or put it in the outtake. But the like, this may just be in movies, I don't know, but like you just see these professors just like the student messes the passage up and they just again, and their students not really able to internalize it, and all they're hearing is again. That's what's getting reinforced, right? Is this repetition without zooming out, examining like what occurred that you didn't intend to have happen. Like my favorite definition of a mistake, I got it from one of my teachers, and it's just a mistake is just something other than what you meant to do, right? And it just takes the charge out of it. But anyway, if we as teachers can allow for that kind of mental rest and physical rest as well within lessons, I think that'll start to reinforce better practicing habits, kind of almost from even a subconscious level, right? Because the environment that we create in lesson studios will kind of influence the environment that the student creates in the practice room or even on stage, right? I mean, we always taught, like, a big thing now is like trauma-based or trauma-aware pedagogy. And they talk a lot about like teachers that just verbally, hopefully not physically, beat down on the students, right? And so I don't know if you may have a different opinion on that, but that might be, that was just kind of an epiphany light bulb moment for me.
No, I definitely think that the way we teach music needs to change. I think that there is a huge, like, generation, or like the generation that's like older, about to retire, like their approach is that like again, like getting angry when the student doesn't accomplish it. And fear can only do so much when like looking for results. So in general, like I definitely think that just teaching practices should change, and even teachers should realize that what you do in the lesson, the student might not take to it immediately, and that's okay because it's something that's brand new to them. It's like when you were learning how to ride a bike, you didn't just like get on that two-wheeler and boogie on down the street. You fell lots. And that's what's going to happen with anything that we do that's new, that's foreign. Like, even if you're just changing someone's technique, they're not going to get it right perfectly. And I feel like so many teachers will blame themselves and be like, oh, if they don't do this right the first time, then I'm a terrible teacher. And it's like, no, we're all human. That's just the way things work. We're not robots. Like, you can't program it into us. And the other thing that you said that really light bulb for me was the mistakes thing, and how a mistake is just something that you didn't plan. And I think that with a lot of trumpet playing, especially with that that older mindset of like repetition, go again, like you're not planning what you want to do. It's like, to take the Olympics thing again, whether it's diving or gymnastics, like all of these athletes have a routine and they know what's going to happen. They have this idea, they have the end result before they even start. And I think a lot of the time with music is like, you just take that breath and you go, and like the first note is surprising because like you weren't really thinking like, what is the note going to sound like? Or like, how do I need to be set up in order to be successful at that? I feel like we just sort of like throw ourselves into it without planning, without being ready for what's coming. And that's another thing that I work on with students too, and myself. I'm better at working on it with students than I am with myself, because I don't have another me nagging me to do that. I always find a loophole with myself. But with my students, we work on ear training. Like, you need to at least have an idea of where the notes are going, what the phrase is going to do, what the rhythm is going to sound like. And that's why so many people struggle with sight reading. because they're not confident with that like internal image, that internal sound. And then all of that. So if you're not even comfortable with knowing how it's going to sound, like you see a piece of music and you're like, oh, I could probably hum that, or like I could sing it. But if you couldn't, you're immediately gonna tighten up. You're gonna lock up and you're gonna try to force all of those notes out. You're not even, at this point, you're not even aiming for the note. You're just like shoving air through the instrument and just hoping for the best. And it's those kinds of practices that eventually lead to injury, overuse, because you are just introducing more and more tension into your body. And we don't want tension. We want to be active, but if you're like squeezing your muscles, like they're not going to be able to move the way we want them to move. It's like I tell my students if you have a reed, if you put too much pressure, too much tension on the reed, it's going to squeak. If you squeeze your lips too much, you're going to get a trumpet squeak. You're going to get a cack. Mm-hmm. So we need to be engaged and active, but we can't be rigid and tight. So that's another just butterfly.
Well, yeah, mind and body is just, it's the same thing. Like we can't have one without the other, right? And yeah, everything we've talked about, for anybody listening who's not a trumpet player, it may seem like this is like really dense trumpet nerdy pedagogy stuff, right? And I mean, you kind of get what you sign up for. You got two trumpet nerds on a podcast, but this is all, like, to zoom out for a second, this is all still under the lens of, or looking through the lens of, injury prevention, right? These techniques, visualization, audiation, they're all so that we can eliminate tension in our body and in our mind, so that we can prevent injury and enjoy what we're doing, right? Because that's the whole goal, is to actually love blowing raspberries into a piece of plumbing, or whatever the case may be.
Exactly. Like it's supposed to be fun. And if you're at the point in your playing where like your body is telling you something, like something is wrong, these muscles aren't doing what they should be doing, then you need to listen. And remember, it's like, it's not heart surgery. Like if you miss a note, no one's going to die. Like you're going to miss a note, whatever. Everybody misses notes. Professional trumpet players miss notes. They're better at hiding them, but they still miss.
Yeah, totally. I want to point out one last thing about what you said a little while ago. I guess from a practice routine standpoint, I think there's a lot of power that comes from zooming out at the right time, like from a perspective standpoint, and zooming in at the right time. So, for example, I could never really relate to the statement that, like, before I got injured, I could never really relate to the statement of like, oh, just make sure you're not like noodling around during your practice sessions, because I didn't feel like I was wasting any time. Like I was planning out every session, probably to a neurotic level, right? Like literally putting minute amounts to it, and practicing copious amounts of hours a day, trying to cover all my bases, because I'm a multidisciplinary musician, right? So I play multiple styles, and trying to cover all my bases in the course of a day, while being a human being and being a college student. And I think in those, like I was, bring it back to that zooming in, zooming out, I think I was zooming in, but that was all I was doing. And I wasn't giving myself the grace of zooming out and appreciating and celebrating the accomplishments that I had given, or that I had attained, as well as the progress that I had made. Because when we're zoomed in, you can't see progress.
No.
And when you're zoomed out, you can't see the process as well.
That's spot on.
What are your thoughts?
I think I was very much like you. In my practicing, I have a whole spreadsheet where I would put the date and I would put my little check marks for all of the skills that I wanted to do. And it got to the point where it was just so overwhelming. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not getting the things done that I want to do. So then I started adjusting it. I'm like, okay. And this was mostly in the summers because like during school, like I had so much ensemble rep to learn. I had recital stuff to learn. So like I had to kind of focus on that. So I did like a series of like fundamentals first thing, like just to check in, like make sure that, I check in with these fundamentals, make sure they're like, working as well as I need to. And then if they pop up in any of the pieces, then I address it. But in summer sessions, and I'm like, oh my goodness, there's this huge list of all of the things that I need to do, and I can't do them every day. So I would take it and I would approach it like a school day. I'd be like, hey, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm doing this. Tuesday, Thursday, I'm doing that. Saturday, Sunday, I'm going to do these other things. So like you don't have to practice the same thing every single day. You don't have to fit all of it into one day. When I was in school and I was just trying to stay afloat, I would have my ensembles on certain days, and the day before I would practice for that ensemble. I would practice everything that I needed the day before for the thing that I needed to do. Obviously, like ideally you'd want a few weeks to prepare, but this is school and everything's so fast paced and like they're just throwing more and more things on you every single day. So
right.
Prepping what you can the day before to the best of your ability and saving face, because school doesn't really give you the opportunity to take a break. So anytime I had to learn something new, I was singing it. I was sitting down on the piano. I was singing the notes, because if I spend the time to like find the notes on the trumpet, figure out like how to center them, figure out the rhythms, all of that, I'm like wasting face, if that makes sense. Like
totally.
I can play those, like once I know what it's supposed to sound like listen to recordings, play along with the piano. I really like the singing aspect because it's sort of like you're putting it into your body, and then
absolutely it's
going to be easier for you to sort of relay that to the trumpet. But anything that you can do away from the horn, like I would either, if I was walking to school, if I was riding the bus, I would have a playlist of all of the songs that I was learning, and I would just sit and listen. If I was feeling really nerdy, I would watch along with the score. Usually I need a score to watch along with because it'll help me keep my focus and I'll be able to like better make that connection when I'm playing trumpet. But like,
for sure,
if I'm driving, I can't have a score. So I have.
Please don't do that. We are not condoning that at the Trust Process podcast, everybody.
But yeah, so like find ways that you can get your practicing in, but then also like you don't need to spend all of that time. Like it's all about finding a balance, right? So I'm not saying like every waking moment, like spend it listening to your rep for band. No, it's like take 30 minutes, take an hour, 15 minutes, however long, and just like get yourself familiar with the music and just trust that you're a good enough musician that you'll be able to do what you need to do the next day. And the great thing about school is that even though it is fast paced, there are so many rehearsals that it's not like in the professional world, you'll have like maybe two, maybe one rehearsal before the concert. So you got to really make sure that you're right up there, like you're playing, your ear training, all of that. But like in school, it's all about like progressing. So like it doesn't have to be perfect by the first rehearsal. You don't want it to sound like you didn't practice it at all, but there is that room for improvement.
Hey guys, hope you're enjoying the show. I just wanted to jump in here real quick and tell you about something that I'm really, really excited about. For a while now, I've wanted to create an even more effective resource than just the podcast that injured musicians can go to receive the support that they need. And recently I did just that. So write this down. Trust the Process Podcast Injured Musician Support Group. I know it's a long title. We're still working on that part. But this is a place where people can go now, injured musicians and even musicians who have gone through injury in the past, and people that help musicians go through injury, where they can go to receive the support that they need, whether that be ask questions, share their victories, share their frustrations, and overall just receive the community and the support that they need in a very proactive, intentional way. And so I just ask that you guys support these injured musicians by sharing this group with them, that they can receive the support that they need. Okay, enjoy the rest of the show. Yeah, the energy conservation and physical, just physical conservation in general is really important for those more physically taxing instruments like trumpet, but even in any instrument, because we're ultimately all using these finer motor skills that break down if we don't take care of them. I want to kind of pivot on the same topic to the athlete side again, in celebration of the Olympics and our shared adulation of Simone Biles, I guess. So, I just got back from a vacation where I was, family reunion in California, and my grandma and I, we were the way we bonded this trip. We've never watched the Olympics together, but we did this entire time with the rest of our family. But we both just kind of were like watching Simone just like with our jaws on the floor the entire week. And it was really interesting to me, to see, because when she dropped out of the Tokyo Olympics, that was pre-injury for me. And then seeing her now in 2024, I'm 2 years into my injury recovery, right? And so I'm just completely watching her with just a completely different perspective, right? And it was interesting to see her just have so much fun at the Olympics, right? This time around. But there were times when like she would be smiling and talking to her teammates, and then literally like it was literally like watching a movie, and like someone would walk past her and block her from the view of the camera, and then like her face would just change on a dime. So she's like smiling and everything, and then she's just locked in, like within a second. And just thinking of her journey. I mean, I've watched interviews and of hers and of what her experience was, especially from the mental recovery side of things. How she was able to come back from something like that. But more importantly for what we're talking about right now, you can just see her at the Olympics going like, I don't know, at least for me, I could see her going through the process and then switching and seeing her progress. Right. So, those times where she was just smiling after she did an event and she knew she nailed it. Right. That was, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a psychic, obviously, but I'm sure that was what was going on in her mind. It was that celebration, right, of all this hard work paying off. Yeah. And before the event, she's like, you can see she's just like staring down I guess it's not a runway, is it, on a vault? I'm going to embarrass myself blatantly, but whatever it's called, the vault event, right? She's just staring it down, or whatever event it was. And, I could tell she's going through the process, right? And so this principle just has application all, in whatever discipline. But I think it is a really, really powerful tool in injury prevention, because then we're not overworking ourselves, right? We're not doing things, we're not putting external pressures over the needs of our body and our mind, right? So the next thing I wanted to ask you was something that I heard you on your podcast. Shout out to the Chat TPT podcast with Kayla and another trumpet, I guess, social media influencer, Dr. Marcus Grant. I've met him in passing. I haven't had a chance to talk to him a ton, but he's a really, really nice guy. And I love listening to you guys talk. But you had an episode called Be a Potato. And I think that this is a nice transition from what we were just talking about, of not overworking yourself and viewing your progression as a whole. But through the lens of burnout and preventing burnout, right? And so if you want to kind of explain what you mean by be a potato, right?
Yes.
I'll link that in the description of this episode. But how does burnout and being a potato, I guess the opposite of burnout would be being a potato, right?
Yeah.
How's
Well,
that relate?
first of all, potatoes are the best food because they're so versatile. And that's my shout out to potatoes. Sponsor me.
Samwise Gamgee is going to sponsor you. Lord of the Rings reference.
Yeah. So for me, it's been really difficult to figure out what I need to do to like take those breaks, because I grew up with the idea that, and I'm pretty sure it's just an idea that I imposed on myself. I don't know. Like my family wasn't really like, oh, you have to be working all the time. Like it was me putting that on myself. And it's like, I always have to be doing something. I always have to be working and like getting better at doing something. Otherwise, like what's the point? The point is to not burn out. So that, which I figured later on, but, I can tell like my body, I will get sick when I'm doing too much. Like my body will start to physically shut down. And there are some times I've gotten a lot better at reading what I need. And there are, some days like after traveling or after like a big event, I will just stay in bed for the entire day. And I've learned that I can allow myself to do that. And I can tell myself that it's okay. My favorite pastime is napping. Napping is my favorite thing to do because then I can't stress about the things that I should be doing and I'm just taking a nap. So one of the best ways for me to avoid burnout is to like let myself sleep, or just like allow myself a day to just like do nothing. And like, it's like if you have a class that's canceled like 20 minutes before, you automatically just gained like an extra hour, or an extra hour and a half. That's time, that's free time that didn't exist before. And it's like, it's so exciting. And it's like, wow, I could sit here and do nothing for an hour and a half when I should have been doing something. And like, but like you have no pressure to do something because like that was already blocked off. So when I block off my potato days or like my days where I do nothing, it's like, I've blocked this time off, And it's hard and it's not going to work for everybody. Sometimes people need like just a few hours to like wind down or isolate themselves. Sometimes people get re-energized by hanging out with other people. That is not me. I need like silence in a room alone.
I need my TV binging days.
Right? Exactly. Times. So it's figuring out something that you can do for you. That you can schedule in to your day, whether it's just like a little bit of time or if it's a full day. I also really like doing sports. So anytime I do sports, it's like a different kind of break because it's not my job, but I'm still being active and I'm still using my body and thinking about, like plays. I play volleyball and I water ski. And that's pretty much it. I play volleyball and I water ski. And I dabble in...
Nothing wrong with that.
Everything else. So, but it's just nice to change it up. It was the same thing when I was in school. I would take math classes as my electives for fun because I liked math, which I know is weird. But it wasn't music and it was a different kind of thinking. So I was still doing something. It just wasn't something that was super stressful for me. Like, because music, when it becomes your job and it becomes your life, it is stressful. And if you want to keep doing things, just do the things that you do for fun. And then also find areas in music that you can do for fun too. Like in my practice sessions, if I don't feel like practicing, I'm only going to play Disney music because that's the only time I'm going to pick up my horn. And it's going to be to play music that I feel like playing. If it's the option between not practicing at all or practicing Disney music, we're going to choose Disney music, right? Because like you want to get the horn on your face, even if it's just to like maintain consistency if you're going through a rut or something. But yeah, those are my...
Yeah.
Those are my thoughts.
No, they're great thoughts. I want to point out something to the audience that you said, or at least that people might be thinking from what you said. What we're talking about here, everyone, is not the get out of jail for free card, right? We're not saying to not work hard at your craft, or to work diligently might be a better way of putting it. What we are saying is that we need to redefine what it means to work diligently, right? Because up until now, I mean, not everybody that's played an instrument has gotten injured, but there are a lot of people who have, like more than that have than haven't, right? And there's just a better way of going about improving as a musician that ultimately improves you as a human being, right? Because at the end of the day, we're going to put the horn down or instrument down and be who we are. And if who we are is the instrument, then when it's gone, that creates that paradox, right?
Yeah.
That dilemma.
And something going off of another thing, we could probably just ping pong back and forth like for hours. But
We could.
what was I going to say? Oh my goodness, I just lost it.
Here, I'll ping pong it back to you.
Try to get it back in my brain. Man, what was I going to say? Keep talking. Just keep saying something.
Well, I likewise, I could totally talk about this. This is my jam. Obviously, this is kind of what I love talking about, but
I remember.
Yes.
We work. So if you're in music, like as a career or whatever, like we work so that we can have a life. We don't want work to become our life. And it's so difficult in the arts because it starts off as a passion and it starts off as a hobby. And then it becomes your work and your life, and it's all together. And that's why it's like so easy to get burnt out, because it's something you love, but now it's something that you have to do. And so if you're constantly like in that loop, you're not really ever getting a break from it. And just like with the process versus progress, it's important to take a step back too. And doing things outside of music are going to make you so much better of a musician. Yeah, that was my thought.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I wish people really hear that last part of what you said, because we think that, there's, this is something that's pretty new to me as a concept, but, I think we kind of conceptualize our progress as linear, right? Because we want it to be. That's just how our brains make sense of things. But I've heard recently that going back to sports, progress is more like a hockey stick. It's exponential, right? So you're going to see all of this kind of like time or effort that doesn't have that immediate reward, but then at the end you start seeing these things, and then it resets.
The plateau.
Then, the plateaus. It's in the book Atomic Habits, James Clear, he says that it's the zone of latent potential, or the plateau of latent potential. I can't remember what exactly his wording is, but that potential to grow is there because you're putting the work in. It's just we don't see it for a while, right? And these mental shifts, I'm so glad we spent a lot of time on these, because for me, this is the work that I've had to do post-injury that I feel like if we don't do, those of us who have gone through an injury, whether it be an athletic one or a musical one, we're putting ourselves up for injury later on down the road, for an overuse injury, because, or I mean, heaven forbid, a traumatic injury that just happens out of the blue. But
those happen too.
And those happen too. I've had people, that have had those types of injuries on the show. But I really think that this working to resolve burnout or prevent burnout is just as effective. Like doing the mental game, doing the mental work is just as effective of an injury prevention tool, an injury recovery tool, because recovery can burn you out too, right? Mm-hmm. As the physical aspect or the physical playing of your instrument, right? So some of my thoughts.
Yeah, all good thoughts. Very, very thought-provoking conversations.
Yeah, totally. I've been loving it. But I do want to be respectful of your time, and there's just a few more questions that I want to ask you.
Yeah, for sure.
In preparing for this interview, I went through your website again and found that you have a certification from the Performing Arts Medicine Association, and they just had their conference in London. I really hope that they have it in the States one of these days.
They had it in LA a few years ago, I think.
Oh, yeah?
But I haven't been to any of their conferences. I've just done like online stuff. So
cool. I mean, I was involved in another podcast that just presented the producers of that podcast just presented at that conference in London. But anyway, so you have a certification from them, and I do know that a lot of educators listen to this show, and whether they be trumpet educators or band directors or whoever. And I just, from your experience in that side of things, from the physical aspect or the mental aspect, whatever, you've learned in that training that you've gotten, what's maybe one strategy that an educator can implement with their students or a student can implement with themselves?
Yeah, I feel like everything that I've done is all blurred together. So I don't know if this is specifically from the PAMA course or from like my own research, but I think one of the most important things for students and educators is to know where your movements are originating from. So everything is kind of like anchored to the torso. A lot of us will think of, if we're playing flute, like it's your forearms, right? You're lifting it up. No, it's actually your back is holding up your shoulders, which is holding up your arms, which is attached to your fingers. So those muscles you need to be engaging while you're playing. You need to think about that's where the strength is coming from. That's where it's starting. And that's what's going to help with your endurance, with your technique, all of that. Because if you're even the idea of just like my movements are coming from my hands, that's it. That's gonna isolate that, and you're gonna get like carpal tunnel or overuse or something, and like you're gonna start to feel it. But if you really think about anchoring yourself from like the bigger muscles are there to support us. They're there to like be the anchor when we start to feel a little bit more tired, and be like, remember, I have these muscles backing me up. I have these muscles they're the ones that are holding my instrument. It's not my arms. It's not my wrists, right? Or for trumpet like this, we're always so far forward, right? You got to think about like getting those shoulders like locked in place in your back so that you can activate those muscles to help you hold up your instrument. And, it just brings a whole new spin to posture, right? Because everyone's like, sit up straight, but it's like, you're not actually sitting up straight. You're engaging like your core and your like the other muscles like in your upper body to like help make yourself stable. So I could talk about that forever. I have lots of opinions on the whole sitting up straight thing. It's like, you gotta know what your muscles are doing and how to use them so that you don't have to work so hard, right? Because if you're not doing something efficiently, then it's just hard to do. And nobody wants it to be hard.
It's already hard. Why make it harder, right? Physical,
Exactly.
mental, why make it harder in any way? And we could totally talk for another whole hour on that topic. I was really frustrated at ITG. I was bouncing around doing so many things. I wasn't able to attend the clinic that you gave on this topic, right? Or topics similar to it. And it's very, very important. This whole concept of body mapping wasn't something I really had heard of until I started down this community building part of injury recovery. And it's so important for any instrument because it's a physical activity, just like athletes who have all those athletic trainers and support staff and stuff like that. We need to be engaging with those other people that can teach us about our bodies and our health as musicians, because what we're going for is longevity, in my opinion.
Yes.
Like that's the other thing that real quick that I just felt like was so like one of the underlying themes of our conversation today was that or the Olympics or whatever is like what all those people are aiming for in their training and their competing is longevity, because they don't want, like, we don't want just one concert to be our only concert, or and that frame of mind can help us when we're feeling pain in a musical situation or in a performing situation where it's like we can tell something's off. And if we have that long game in mind, that we're aiming for longevity, not just to like fulfill this one little short-term goal, that kind of will help us in the long run as well.
Yeah. And if you think about pro athletes, they don't play their sports for nearly as long as musicians play their instruments. If you think of like Doc Severinsen, like in his 90s playing trumpet, like you don't see any athlete out there doing some like flips on the gymnastics floor at 90 years old. That would be so cool. I would so watch that. Can we have the seniors Olympics?
The Senior Olympics?
It needs to happen. Except like in a padded room with foam pits so that they don't get actually hurt. But I do, I would love to see it.
For sure. So Kayla, just the last thing I want to ask you, I have a couple of questions that I ask all my guests at the end of the show. Each episode is, the first one is like, just if somebody were to come up to you, right, at ITG or in your studio or wherever and say, hey, I heard you on Trust the Process, the podcast, and I'm going through an injury myself, and what advice, how can you help me? Like what is one thing that you can tell me that I can apply?
If you're going through an injury, I think it's important to know that you're not alone. A lot of people are afraid to talk about their injuries, but there are people out there that are going through the same things as you or similar things, and you should definitely like seek them out, talk to them, ask them about their experience, ask them for advice, for help, because the people who have overcome injuries are like rock stars. They're superstars because, they experienced something that really put a setback in their playing and they recovered and they're thriving now. So get in touch with people. There's a ton of online communities. Like there's the Embouchure Project on Facebook has a group.
That's the podcast I worked on that presented at PAMA, by the way.
Oh, they just
Definitely
added me to
check it
the
out.
group. Yeah, I was like, oh, this is cool. Look at all this information. So there is
so good,
so much more information out there now than there was like even 5 years ago. So
absolutely,
it's good that people are talking about this more because it's a problem and it needs to be acknowledged.
Totally. And the second question, a lot of the questions that I ask on the show are things that I kind of almost selfishly ask them because they're things that I've either asked in the past or I'm still working on now. And one thing that I always, it took me a while to come to terms with was this whole, like, especially as a collegiate musician, of like this concept of not feeling like I'm in control of my time, right? And not feeling like I have the time to implement these other things because they are new habits that I would need to form, right? So what would you say to that person who feels like I just listened to this podcast and it feels like such good information, but I don't know if I can implement it or if I have time, just the spiral just keeps going, what would you say to that person?
Add one thing at a time to your routine or to your schedule. There's a bunch of books. There's like the 5 a.m. Club was really good. I read that one and it was just talking about like it takes 30 days to build a habit and you want to tack your new habits onto something you already do. So like in the example of like I don't know, affirmations or something, which you can choose to do them in your day. You can choose to leave them. But it's like, I know people who will put little sticky notes on their mirror in their bathroom with their affirmations. And it's like, you get up every day and you go to the bathroom and you brush your teeth, or like you wash your face and you see them there and you're reminded to do them. And then that becomes a habit. Let's say if you're warming up, playing trumpet, and you're like, okay, something that I've been doing is I've been incorporating like some full body like warm up exercises into my trumpet warm up as well. So, but it's nothing crazy. Like, I'm like, before I pick up my trumpet, I'm going to do some shoulder rolls, just get those muscles activated. Like, it takes a few seconds and it'll get to the point, in 30 days where that's a habit that I've built. And then once that's built, then you can add another thing on. You can't completely change your life in one day, just like what we talked about with the teachers, right? It's going to take time, and you have to be patient with yourself, and you have to know that, like, as long as you're doing a little bit at a time, that's what matters.
Absolutely. And I'll just point out as well that, like, we're more in control of our time than I think we want to believe. It's like when we give control of our time to other people, it's like we're almost giving the control of the outcomes of our life to other people. And whether we realize it or not, putting the blame on other people for the lack of time we have. And that's just not the case. There's obviously obligations we have, but I don't know. I just found it really empowering to realize that I am in control of how I choose to use my time. And I can choose to use my time for really good things, that can keep me healthy. So
exactly.
Well, Kayla, this has just been an awesome conversation. It's been a lot of fun talking to you a little more, and really look forward to our future interactions.
For sure.
And at other ITGs possibly, and other events. And to everyone out there in podcast land who's been joining us for the last hour or so, thanks for listening. Share it with somebody you know who's going through injury, or an educator who you feel this would benefit, whoever you feel that would get a lot of value out of this. Just would mean the world if they got to check this out. And also send me a message. In the audio versions of these episodes now, there's a way you can send me a text. Send me some fan mail, if I dare call it that. So anyway, keep on keeping on, everybody, and keep trusting the process. Hey, before you go, we need your help with something real quick. Somewhere out there's a musician who is going through an injury or just a tough time. There may even be an educator with a student in that situation that they don't know how to help. We need your help in getting this message to them. Would you do them the favor of sharing this episode on your socials and with your friends? Also, cliche that it may have become, leaving a rating and a review actually does help people find us, not just boost our ego. So would you take a quick second and leave us a review so that musician can find us more easily? If you want to reach out to me personally, I would love to hear from you. Just look for the Send Us a Text Message button in the show notes of the episode. You can do that on any episode on your chosen podcast platform except YouTube. If you have a suggestion for a guest or topic to cover, shoot me an email at trustprocesspodcast@gmail.com or send me a message on Facebook or Instagram. I want to extend another heartfelt thanks to my team, without which this podcast would not be able to happen. Thanks to Daniel Baldwin, our audio engineer, Kevin West, our music and sound effects coordinator, and Dana Lovell, our promotional materials coordinator. So to all of you out there in podcast land, keep on keeping on and trust the process.